Hello and welcome to the United Mates Football Podcast. My name is Joe, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host all the way from LA, Keitel. And we're also delighted to be joined by a guest. Franco is one of the hosts of the Cheese Room podcast. And whilst the title of this podcast may fool you, it's less about Brie and more about Bale. Or to be more precise, it's all about the mighty, or I guess at the moment, the not so mighty Spurs. So Franco, welcome to the United Mates podcast. How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. Football-wise, not so good, as I'm sure you'll agree. But I'm glad to be here and have a little chat about all things Spurs.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Keitel here. Really good to have you on the podcast, Franco. We're going to do our little icebreaker as we typically do to get into this. And rather than going down the cheese route, I'm going to go down the Franco route. So obviously, okay. I think most of us are probably aware of James Franco and his brother, even Dave Franco, the kind of acting brothers in Hollywood. So I think the first time they actually were able to act in a film together was a recent movie called The Disaster Artist. And that's about basically an actual film called The Room by Tommy Wiseau, which is notorious for being pretty much the best, worst movie ever. So on that note, today's icebreaker question is what each of our favorite bad movies or TV shows are. And I'll start. So when I was a kid, the first Star Wars movie that I went to see in the movie theaters was Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which when you're a kid was quite cool because there was pod racing. That scene was fun. And then there was a double-edged lightsaber, which again, if you're a kid, which I was at the time, that was more than enough to satisfy me. But I watched it recently and surprise, surprise, it does not hold up. The story is nonsensical. It's really bad. They had amazing actors in it, which just makes it even more impressive that they were able to screw it up so badly. And then again, even Jar Jar Binks, who at the time was like the comic relief and quite funny, sadly is just like very racially insensitive character. So there's nothing redeeming about this film whatsoever. Franco, what do you think your favorite bad movie or TV series might be?
When I was at uni, me and my mates, for some reason, one night we just hired any film, and my mate went to the Blockbuster, wherever it was, and he picked up a film called Boa on the strength that it had Dean Cain, who was in The New Adventures of Superman. He played Superman. It's the worst B movie ever. They basically go to Antarctica and they're drilling for thermal heat or something, and they somehow awaken this prehistoric boa constrictor, which is massive. It's just like terrible effects, terrible everything. And Dean Cain basically just makes it. So if you're ever looking for a film to watch, check it out. Boa. It's like Sharknado before that was even conceptualized.
Right. Boa. I mean, I wonder if that came before Anaconda, which was obviously, what was that, J-Lo and Ice Cube? So maybe that was the film that inspired another
like budget version of that. Yeah. Budget Anaconda.
Love it. Joe, what about you? Some bad movies?
Yeah, well, I feel bad calling it a bad movie because I do love this movie, but it has to be Hot Tub Time Machine. I think I think it's quality. I mean, I think the second one maybe not so much. I don't know if I even saw that, but yeah, Hot Tub Time Machine. What an idea, and what a movie. But yeah, away from bad movies and bad TV series. Now we've got a few questions, Franco, about the Cheese Room podcast, a podcast that, as a Spurs fan, I've got to say I really, really enjoy listening to. So the first question we've got for you is the fact that the Cheese Room obviously prides itself on the fact that, you know, you have people from all over the globe kind of contributing to it. So what I was interested in was sort of how did the podcast begin? I know a lot of people might live all over the place, but mainly are kind of British. Were you a group of people that all knew each other, or did you all kind of meet on the internet, on Spurs forums and stuff like that?
Yeah, the latter. Essentially, GGTH, Glory Tottenham Hotspur, which was one of kind of like the original Facebook groups. It was the largest for a while, and there's obviously now loads. And I was on there for like 7-8 years, just arguing with anybody, trying to be positive. And then Aaron, who's kind of the founder of the Cheese Room, he's based in Sydney. He kind of came on there, and he's like out there, very out there, and he was posting sort of loads of stuff that got loads of traction on there, and he's a real colourful character. So based upon that, he thought, well, people seem to like the sort of stuff that I'm putting out, so maybe I'll do a pod. And he started it, and I think they did about 4 or 5 episodes with a few of the people from GGTH, and then he got me on board, and then it just kind of grew. We just kind of, we started our own Facebook page, that grew, and then we just started bringing people in from everywhere. So we've got quite a few Yanks. And at the end of our first season, we basically then we did this sort of like pretend tour of America, going around on our Winnebago, speaking to all the different football groups, the supporters clubs out there, because it's obviously a big thing in America now. So we got like 6 or 7 of those guys on, and then it's just people kind of get in touch with us and say, I'm really interested. It's amazing the amount of sort of expats. We were really trying to get people from the supporters clubs who are proper Americans and finding out why they would support Spurs. And the amount of expats that are out there who just got nominated every time. They're like, this guy knows more about football than us. So we were like, no, we want some Yanks, please. Let's talk to the Americans. So that's it, really. We've just kind of grown, and we're now in our 3rd season.
It's impressive how many Spurs fans there are out there globally, or if not any, I guess like a little bit concerning, maybe from my point of view at least. But another question about the cheese room, and more focusing on kind of the content that you produce. To my knowledge, you kind of you were telling us a bit about the origins, but for a while it was all free entirely. Whereas now you have certain content that's a bit more exclusive through, I believe, Patreon, which is a pretty common step when it comes to monetizing a podcast or any kind of like creative content that's done freelance. So my question would be that now that the cheese room is where it is in that regard with monetization and a bit of a budget, how has that transition been for you guys? How has the reaction been from your fans? And then what has this monetization aspect allowed in terms of new opportunities that you might not have been able to use for the podcast prior?
This answer is going to be very disappointing. I mean, look, I think when we first started up, there's obviously costs involved in hosting. I think we went a bit too far too quickly. We got a website. Everybody sort of bought microphones that were sort of £200 each and stuff like that. So we ended up having spent about £2,000. And at that point, no money was coming in whatsoever. And like I said, Aaron, who founded it, he had a kid in the last year. So he's kind of been busy doing that. And it's basically like he's been our benevolent benefactor who's paying for stuff. And we just kind of commit ourselves to like eight hours a week doing the pods. So we kind of thought, look, we can't have this forever. We need to sort of start paying Aaron back. And we got a little sponsorship stuff. We don't really want to do sports betting advertising in a sort of moral argument, and we didn't really want to talk about shaving our balls either. We've had that offer that seems to be everywhere. So we got one that we're really happy with, football prizes, but then we just thought it'd be really good to sort of have a bit more interaction with our top fans. We've got a Facebook page with like 20,000 people on it, 18,000 people. And there's a lot of regulars on there, and we have some good chat and stuff on there. But we thought we really want to talk to the people that listen to us regularly and see how many there are out there. So it was really like dipping our toes in the water to see what was out there. And like, all right, we've only got about 50 people so far, but that's really all we expected. Like our costs aren't that high. And, we are going to sort of give merch and stuff to these people. We're not looking to make money out of it, but we want to do things like, run little competitions amongst them, give Spurs shirts, just do cool stuff like interaction between us and the people who listen to us. And we use Slack, which is very similar to like Messenger or any other sort of chat app to communicate with each other. So we had all these different channels, all these different things like, YouTube ideas, these ideas. And we just thought, well, let's just give that to the Patreons as well, because then we can chat to them. And that was supposed to be just sort of match day. Like I was talking about the game, sort of moaning about, Dyer misplacing passes and stuff like that, but it's turned into just like an everyday chat, which we had anyway. Now we just include them anyway. So it's just great because we get to talk to people that listen to the pod. They get to tell us direct feedback and stuff like that. So it's for us, it's worked out really well.
And I suppose Aaron gets to maybe recoup a little bit.
This is it. We need to have these. We need to have these chats at some point. He at the minute has gone off and he's doing a fantasy basketball pod. It's a massive thing apparently, and the Aussies love it as well. So, and he's well into it. So he's kind of diversifying his portfolio. You know what I mean? He's moved out a little bit, so he's not so focused on us. He's a busy man. But yeah, it's the thing is, people don't seem to realise that if you do pay for things like decent hosting and things like that, then it costs money. And as much as it wasn't going to cripple us financially, it's just like you do feel like, well, I'm giving a lot of my time and a lot of this for nothing. So it'd be good to see if people are willing to support us, and it's a beautiful thing. I love the fact that people, even if it's only a couple of quid a month, just the fact that people are willing to do that is really humbling, and it sounds really wanky saying that, but it is. It's great.
No, it's it is a great thing. It's great to build a community, and I mean you already have one, but it just kind of shows the power of Patreon, and I'm sure your numbers will continue to grow because, like I said, it's a great listen that people are already recognizing. But one of the things actually that I think makes the Cheese Room such a compelling listen is the fact that people on the podcast, they're not afraid to speak passionately. So, for example, the episode you just released about the West Ham game, that was a really interesting listen, actually, because you had the Harlow Globetrotter and Seb really getting into it, and kind of it really encapsulated kind of almost two different types of Spurs fans in the way and how people feel about Mourinho. But obviously it can get quite heated, but it makes for a very entertaining listening. But as a host, Franco, when these kind of heated debates emerged, how do you feel about it? Do you feel a responsibility to sort of act as a peacemaker of sorts, or is it something that just doesn't really cross your mind and you just kind of let the guys go at it, as it were?
It depends. Like, I edit the pods quite heavily. I know some pods don't bother at all. You had Flav on here the other week from the Fighting Cock. I get the feel that theirs is just like down the pub. Let's have a chat. Everything goes. And a few others that do exactly the same. But I take a fair amount of pride in making it quite a tight edit. And there's not loads of stuff that gets cut, but it's like little bits of talking over, and when arguments points aren't really that substantial, I cut them out. And I think at the weekend, it was just like, right, I'm going to let these two go. Seb was in a really bad mood after that match. I mean, we've been on a really bad run, and it kind of felt like that was the watershed moment where he was just like, no, I need to rant at this. And I think that's the thing with the chat as well. Sort of people give their opinions after the match, and HG has said a few things where he was just like, well, it's not that bad. It's not that different to how we normally play. And I think Seb kind of went in there spoiling, and they both were. So it was like, yeah, all right, I'll let you go this time, and I'm not gonna bother refereeing it too much at all. You probably noticed I was probably about 5% of that pod, and those two took up the remaining. So yeah, I do think that some pods just are very ranty, and we try not to do that either. Like, we basically do match reviews, and we get a few people moaning at us going, well, you never talk about the big issues at the club, like Levy and the ownership and this and this and this. We're not really interested in doing that. Like, we'll do that at the end of the season where there's transfers to be made and movements that will, the chairman and Hitchin and different people can actually influence. But apart from that, we're doing match reviews. We're just going to talk about the game, what we see on the pitch. Like, I never, in my 16, 17 years of going to Spurs, after a match would come out and go like, Levy's fault. You just wouldn't. You talk about what you've just seen, wouldn't you? And say, can you believe you missed that open shot? Can you believe how bad we were today at defending? Can you believe this? So that's exactly what we do with the match review. And that's it really. We just try and sort of give our honest opinions about what we saw in the game and what we would do to change things.
Well, maybe we'll be able to draw you on some of the bigger picture Spurs kind of Levy topic stuff later.
You can do that today, no problem. No problem.
Sounds good. Otherwise, as the person who edits this podcast, I can definitely relate to kind of keeping these things in your mind as they're happening and sort of projecting forward to what you want the end product to look like. But let's move on to our first game, because we have got a game that we've prepared. And it's actually been a little while since we've been able to feature this collaboration on the pod, but I'm delighted to say that today's version of Pick That One Out has been produced by our good friend Adam Sparrow from Radio Rochdale. And of course, Adam's commentary debuted on the pod back when we spoke to Rochdale footballer Jimmy Keohane. That day the goals were Ireland themed, but of course he's provided some Spurs related content for us today. So the name of the game, as I mentioned, is Pick That One Out. It's going to be up to Joe and Franco and then anybody else listening along to the podcast to guess the infamous goal that's being described based on Adam Sparrow's original commentary. And just for the record, no, I am not Adam Sparrow. I'm just rolling the clips, although to be fair, nobody has ever seen us in the same room together. Anyway, here is the first goal.
It's the scorer of the game's only goal so far on the ball now, and he strides forward in the number 18 kit. I don't think that will be his number for much longer if he keeps playing like this. He lays it off to his fellow giant of a striker. Supposedly, if you give him the ball, he will score. Anyway, the former Arsenal man miscontrols the ball on the edge of the area, but ends up bundling past three defenders nevertheless. The opposition want a free kick, but no dice, and now the ball breaks to the edge of the area, and oh, Dios míos! Rabona! The young lad may as well hang up his boots after this game, because he will never hit a sweeter strike than that one as long as he lives. Between you and me still, he's got no right foot.
All right. So, as I mentioned, Adam Sparrow has provided the original commentary of some classic goals in the past. This one is Spurs related. Do either of you have any ideas what the goal he was commentating on might be?
Got a feeling, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go for it then, Franco.
Well, the mention of Rabona, I would suggest it's Mr. Lamela in the Europa League.
Indeed, it was Mr. Eric Lamela, who apparently has previous, because he, I think, even did something similar for River Plate back in the day.
He was born doing Rabonas, yeah.
He does love them, yeah.
Only he was good at anything else. No, I'm just kidding. He had quite a nice run the other day where he almost set up Harry Kane.
He's been actually okay recently. I've never really been the biggest fan. Yeah, he's been better than I'd say he normally is.
Here's the second one.
The visitors really need something soon, or this could get very embarrassing. Like, even more embarrassing than the neon kits they're sporting. Anyway, it's their Trinidadian striker on the ball, and he plays it forward to the French midfielder, who spreads it to the Colombian attacker out wide. That was a very international piece of interplay. Left-footed cross towards the back post, and nobody's tracked the runner. He's controlled it with his arm, though, surely. But the ref's happy to play on, and he slams it into the back of the net. Goal stands, and the scorer and his two-toned haircut make their way back into the away team's half for the restart. We could be about to see one of the most incredible comebacks in league history.
So, whether or not the comeback did end up happening, do either of you have any ideas who Adam was talking about?
Yeah, that was from a nice game for Tottenham fans, and yeah, that was. It never should have been allowed, that goal.
Franco, though, how about you? It seems like Joe might have it.
No, did he say Trinidad and Tobago striker?
There was, a footballer on that team from Trinidad, although his name is the name of another country, which is quite random. But don't think about that too much because it might throw you off. Otherwise, they're not in the Premier League anymore, this team. And I mentioned that the comeback might have been on, but instead, Spurs ended up just scoring more and more and more goals against this team that day.
No, I pass. Joe?
Go on. I'll reveal it was Paul Sharma's goal against Spurs when we beat them 9-1, Wigan Athletic.
In that, it was indeed.
And yeah, it never should have been allowed, that goal. Handball, but we can get over it. We got 9 that day, so it's all right. They can have 1.
Yeah, I figured Adam, I guess, didn't want to be too nice to you guys as Spurs fans, so he's gotten a Spurs goal and then a goal against Spurs. This other one, again, is going to be related to Spurs, but not necessarily a goal for Spurs. Here we go.
Ball on the left, and now the play makes its way infield. It's the diminutive and dreadlocked Brazilian midfielder bursting forward, and he slips the ball through to the marquee signing, but he's been forced wide, and now he's almost on the goal line with a defender shadowing him. Ooh, that was a bit clever. See ya, Ginge. Ricky Martin would have been proud of that hip-swiveling manoeuvre, and now he's one-on-one from the angle, but he's going to put it on a plate for his teammate instead. That's game over. I think the assist provider has a spot on strictly waiting for him whenever he wants it based on those moves.
So, I'll say Tottenham aren't playing in this game, but one of the players being described is pretty synonymous with Tottenham at one point in his career.
As in played for Tottenham?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a Brazilian midfielder who plays it to a striker who used to play for Spurs, and then he sets up one of the best players in the world who used to play for another team in the Premier League, which is this team.
Oh, okay. So Real Madrid related?
Yeah, this guy went on to play for Real Madrid after Man United, the one who ended up scoring the goal. And then
so it's Cristiano we're talking about, are we?
But the assister used to play for Tottenham.
So Michael Carrick?
No, this was I believe he signed for United in 2008 and might have gone on to become the league's top scorer either that season or the season after.
Oh, what?
Berbatov?
Yes, it was against West Ham. Does anyone remember that?
Oh, yeah, sort of. Yeah, he sort of does a really nice little turn, and
Berbatov is like by the goal line in the corner. I think James Collins comes to get him, and he does this like weird FIFA skill move, gets around him, and then passes it to Ronaldo. So maybe that one was a bit too obscure, considering that, like I mentioned, neither Tottenham were playing or scoring or being scored against. But the answer was yes, Dimitar Berbatov assisting Ronaldo.
As soon as the player leaves Spurs, they're dead to me. So.
I can relate.
Especially Berbatov.
Once they go to United, it's done. Van Persie, that's you don't. Yeah, don't say anymore. That's I but I guess. Well, was it one apiece? I think each of you got one there, and then I might have had to get you over the line for the last one. So we'll call that a tie, which is very diplomatic.
Okay.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, we played our first game. Now time to talk about Spurs. I don't know if I'm excited about that or not, but I think we probably should, given we've got Franco on. So. Obviously, Franco, since November, things have, they've literally in the league gone downhill in the Premier League. And there's obviously a lot of questions being pointed at our manager, José Mourinho. But at the same time, we are still in the Carabao Cup final, albeit against a ridiculously good City team who are on form at the moment, and still early stages, but we're still in the Europa League 2. And at the time of recording, it's the day before the second leg. So hopefully Wolfsberger don't do a number on us in that. But personally, I'm not Jose Mourinho's biggest fan. I never have been. But at the same time, I have found sort of the Spurs Twitter community. I mean, every football fan community is an interesting place when your club's not doing well. Yeah. I have found at points the criticism has potentially been over the top. So I guess what I was interested in, Franco, is, look, Mourinho, he's been making questionable selection decisions. He keeps changing the centre-backs. There's obviously been the problems with other players. You know, there's been the issues with Delhi. There's been he didn't start Bale the other day when he had a good game midweek. But where do you stand on Mourinho? Do you think the criticism is justified, or is it a bit over the top, given the season's still got a bit left in it?
Well, to be fair, Joe, isn't everything on Twitter and social media over the top? I think that's the point, is that everybody's trying to get their retweets and their likes. So therefore you need to say something outlandish, whether it's on one side or the other. And I think that's the other thing about the pod, is we don't tend to do that. We're all fairly like, right, let's keep our feet on the floor. It's not the end of the world. It's not the greatest time ever. Like when we were top of the league, none of us were saying like, yeah, we're definitely going to win the league. Definitely going to win. And likewise at other bad times, we've not sort of gone over the top about it. And I used to spend a lot of my time on social media just basically being contrarian. Whatever people go mental, I'd just be arguing the opposite. It wasn't that bad a result. We'll be back on it next week. When we're doing really well, we're not going to win the league. Look, we're not that good. So with Jose, I think if you go all the way back, you probably know that the fan base was probably split 50-50. People liked him, people didn't like him, maybe slightly more people didn't like him. But he comes with lots of baggage and he comes with a history. And I think recently, if you look at what he did at Man United, you've got loads of Man United fans saying he's going to be terrible for you. He's going to ruin your club. So there's always this little element of fear in the background. Then you look at his record and you go, well, you can't argue with that. So it's like, what do? You let him have a go. And I think after coming up to sort of, it's over a season now, isn't it? I forget how many games in the Premier League he's actually played, 40 something. It's not that great. Like, there's not been vast improvements. It felt like there might have been at the start of the season. We were being a bit more solid, a bit harder to beat. But the football's boring. If I was paying for my season ticket to go and watch this, I would be moaning a lot more. I know I would. It's like when you're just watching it at home, it's quite easy to switch it off. And at least then you're at home straight away. You can do whatever you need to do. You haven't got that journey back from the ground. You haven't got to listen to all the other Spurs fans moan about it. You haven't got to listen to the radio and talk sports. All the things you do normally on the way back from a football match, to kind of make you realise how terrible the performances were. And I just think he's a different style of manager as well. I feel like whilst Poch did everything to absorb the blows and he very rarely blamed players for anything, Jose seems very much about deflecting blame from himself and sort of maintaining this this aura of him being the special one still. He's like clinging onto it with dear life. And I feel like, he said something weird again in yesterday's, Sunday's post-match, didn't he? He said, like, there's things that need improving that I can't improve in the club or something like that. It was equally as nonsense as that bad rendition of what he said. And I don't know. I just don't ever feel like with Jose, you're ever going to get a manager that's 100% committed to the club. He's more about his own image and his own performance. And it's, I think that's starting to show a little bit. I mean, today, again, he's come out and said that Spurs are going to remember me for good things and not bad things. So I'm like, you've got to admire that confidence, but I don't think confidence is going to be enough, Jose. And I don't know how many seasons you're going to have to stay at Spurs for us to kind of remember you fondly.
You mentioned sort of being at home is kind of a silver lining these days when teams aren't performing. As an Arsenal fan living in the States, I get like the double bonus.
We've seen it happen with your lot, no offense, but like, for the last three, all those seasons where you were trying to get rid of Wenger and there was Arsenal Fan TV were kind of churning things up a little bit, weren't they? Because that was the main media output. And at least like 80-90% of the people that on there were moaning about the manager, moaning about the board. And in the end, they pretty much started the movement that got Wenger sacked. And then it's not really improved too much since, has it? It's that thing of grass is always greener. And you kind of have these ideas, but it doesn't work out. And I wouldn't have wanted to be going to Arsenal games in those days with those hostile atmospheres, people arguing in the crowds and fighting and stuff like that. And it would be happening at Spurs right now. I can almost guarantee it.
Like you said, it's not like, we're suddenly just way better than you or anything. We're going through the same struggles. I just am happy that Mourinho's not our manager, to be honest with you. But I won't dwell on that too much. I have a question for you about actually a couple players that Joe had already brought up, the likes of Bale. And then I think I'll ask you that, and then I want to ask you something about Dele Alli. But as far as Bale, obviously he has kind of stepped up in the past couple games against Wolfsburg and West Ham. Do you think realistically that he can add anything meaningful to this team between now and the end of the season if he can sort of stick in Mourinho's good books?
If you'd have asked me 2 games ago, I would have said no, because we'd seen virtually nothing. I don't get what's going on with Bale. He seems like it's not even 50%. He seems like he was on 20% for most of the season up until that point. And the goals he scored and the little kind of touches you've seen here and there are so sparse and so few and far between. You almost think, I'm not sure he's ever going to be able to step up. What is he going to need? And then the last 2 games, you've just seen little glimpses and you've just seen those little bits of quality that you remember from him. But it's you compare that to the player that left, who as soon as he got the ball was like, boom, direct, down the wing, through the middle, whatever. You'd have Defoe, Lennon, him. It was just dangerous. Whenever he got the ball, it was exciting. And that was the thing that, the fans would be up on their feet almost instantly, because you knew that if he was breaking, there'd be a chance at the end of it. And along with that, some of the brilliant goals he scored, some of them just absolutely phenomenal. He had an absolute rocket of a left foot for those 1 or 2 seasons. And I think if he can play incrementally better from what he was in the last 2 games, then yeah, because the rest of our forward players have not contributed enough. It's been Kane and it's been Son, and the rest have got hardly any goals between them. Lucas Moura, Bergwijn, Lamela, none of them are getting loads of goals this season. And I think, Bale should be given more of a chance. And if he's up for it and he's going to play like he did the last 2, then he's probably in first place, ahead of those guys at the moment.
Yeah, I think fair enough. Actually, Bale does seem to have a bit more end product, given sort of the amount of appearances he's had and the actual goal contributions he's given compared to the likes of Lamela and Moura. But I guess moving from one player who might have had his heyday in the past to another one who shouldn't, because he hasn't realistically reached his prime in terms of age, and that would be Dele Alli. So obviously, I think the kind of popular opinion out there is that Mourinho has frozen him out and treated him quite harshly. Dele was an unbelievable talent when you first got him, not just in terms of, Spurs fans, like as far as England as well. He was potentially going to be a guy to really take us places. And now he's clearly not near that level where he was performing before. So without any of us being experts or, having that like fly on the dressing room wall experience, do you think that Dele is as much to blame for what has happened versus like Mourinho? At the end of the day, it's his career, Do you think Dele has attitude issues?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not good enough on the pitch, then you don't deserve to be picked. That's what I think. But I do question why he's been frozen out quite as severely as he has. Some of the Europa League games he could have definitely played. He could have. Sometimes he wasn't even on the bench for certain games after having played relatively well in sort of short space of time in the Europa League. So I do question Jose's motivation of him a little bit. But it's really odd because we had obviously the All or Nothing documentary, and he comes in and says something about Dele was the only player that Ferguson ever told him to buy, something like that. So he's like, from the start, he's like, I'm holding Dele to a really high standard. And then he has that sort of post-match chat with the whole team, and he says to Dele, you're a fucking lazy trainer or something like that. So he's obviously like having little digs, but it's all like friendly. It's like your uncle or something like that. It's like friendly uncle having a little joke with him. But then it just seems to have just completely gone off a cliff, because last year when Kane and Son were injured, Dele came in the side and contributed a few goals. And I just don't think Jose knows where to fit him in. I think Jose's got a system that Dele doesn't necessarily fit. And the best we got out of him was when he was really playing as a striker. He was in that position behind Kane, but Kane would drop, Dele would go, and just his movement into the box and timing was 99% of what was the best about his game. The goals he got were all about arriving in the box and, a quick control finish. I remember one goal, I think it was against Everton, where he just played this ridiculously long ball and he just got in the end of it, touch, bang, goal. Those sort of things were what he was doing. And the goal against Palace, little moments of magic like that. But I don't think he's agile enough maybe to be a sort of centre midfielder. And it's just difficult to know where is best to utilize Dele's attributes at the moment. And you can see as well on the All or Nothing documentary, he comes in at half time and moans about playing long ball. And I can just imagine that he's just said something at some point. Or, he's probably the sort of guy that sits in the changing room and is just sort of muttering under his breath about how unhappy he is with how we're playing and stuff like that. And I just don't think Jose will tolerate it. He's the egos in football and in the changing room are massive. And I don't think Jose would allow anybody to sort of start pulling apart his tactics or undermining him. So could well be that, but I just don't know. And I don't think he played particularly well at the weekend when he came on. I don't think he's played particularly well in a long time. So it's really difficult to see a way back for Dele. I really thought he would go to PSG, but that didn't even really seem like Poch wanted him.
I guess it's no surprise then that two of Mourinho's seemingly favourite players have no personality whatsoever. Dyer and Harry Kane.
Dyer Dyer is the most sullen person, isn't he? He just mumbles, or just like, he's but then again, then he kicks off and goes chasing after people in the crowd.
Don't insult his brother. Yeah.
He's like a hibernating bear. When you prod him, he goes wild.
I do want to pose a scenario to you now, Franco, and it's nice. To be honest, it's not a particularly nice one, but it's one that, given things aren't going well, there is a fairly realistic possibility that we could end the year outside the top four. I think that's pretty certain. We could lose the Carabao Cup final to City, and then the cherry on top of this awful situation would be getting knocked out of the Europa League 2. So in this scenario, we wouldn't be in the top four and we wouldn't have a trophy. So for the sake of this scenario as well, I'm assuming that if this happens, Mourinho would be sacked. So bearing that in mind, well, number one, who would you want to replace Jose Mourinho? And then two, given in this scenario, Kane might end up leaving, we're not going to be in the Champions League, it might not be possible to appoint those big names that we ideally want. Who do you think would be a kind of realistic successor to Mourinho in this awful scenario?
Well, the manager I wanted was Marco Rose, and he's decided to go to Dortmund, doesn't he? So, and the weird thing, they announce it, but he's not going to go until the end of the season. It's almost like
very German, very German way.
Very pragmatic. Yes, I come in 6 months, but it's almost like just saying, he's coming here, so don't anybody else try and sack their manager and come for him. But it's weird. Germany seems to be producing quite a few of these forward-thinking managers at the moment, don't they? Like a lot of the ones that are sort of being attached to Spurs, like Nagelsmann as well. And then there's quite a few in the Premier League, and then you've got Hasenhüttl as well. He looked like he was doing really well at the start of the season before Southampton have kind of just fallen away. And so there's a few of those, but it's really difficult, isn't it? You look what English managers are doing well at the moment, and really Brendan Rodgers is having success, but I just find him a bit insufferable. Like the HG on the pod hates him and thinks he's a fraud, but you can't dispute what he's done at the moment. He's got that Leicester team with good players playing really well.
It's kind of like the Jose Mourinho who plays attacking football. He probably wouldn't be like, but at least if we don't have to like the manager, at least his football might be more palatable. But I think even someone like him, if we're not in the Champions League, I just couldn't see him coming, because Leicester, I think, probably will get in the top four this year. They look even better than they were last year. Yeah, I just worry. I worry he might be too high a target. So do you think Hasenhüttl probably would come, and we're much better than Southampton, but is there anyone else in that kind of Hasenhüttl bracket that is realistic?
Well, Nuno at Wolves is probably also another, but again, they're not playing as well. So it's difficult. There's no managers beneath us that are really riding high at the moment, or sort of over, they've had good sort of spots here and there, but it's difficult because I think the reason we went for Jose in the first place was like, if we were going to get rid of Poch, who had a lot of love, a lot of people in the club love Poch. Still, people are buying PSG shirts. Sorry, no.
God,
no.
a bit crazy.
I love Poch, but just come on, get a grip. And so I think he felt like he had to get a manager with really a long track record of success. And Jose, you can't argue. He's up there, but we're not going to get Pep. We're not going to get someone, Ancelotti taken. So there's very few managers out there who I think would be going for. I mean, you look at even Barcelona have got Koeman. It's like it's just even the best clubs in the world are scraping for managers at the moment. So it's like it is difficult, especially I think these days when success seems to be narrowed down to very few clubs. Like in France, it's going to be whoever's managing PSG is going to win stuff. Like no disrespect, Poch, well done, but it's not that difficult. And the same in England. It's like it's virtually a Man City and Chelsea and Man United and Arsenal win the FA Cup, don't they? Things like that. So it's like the trophies and the success is not spread amongst a large amount of managers either. So it's very difficult. And where do you go? You always feel like after you've gone in one direction with a manager, somebody who's quite defensive and quite boring, for want of a better word, you want to kind of go the opposite direction. So you want someone who's a bit more exciting. So I don't know. Maybe we'll get our dealers to come back in and
yeah.
Give it a go again.
Plot twist, maybe Marcelo Bielsa, if we're looking for the complete 180 of Jose Mourinho. And even if Kane ends up leaving, he can just bring Bamford along with him and you'll be fine.
There you go. We'll get the master. We've had the apprentice. Now we'll get the master.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's done all right as well. But I just think there's a naivety with that style of football as well. You can't argue with like Leeds have had some great results this year, but also they've got spanked. We smashed them 3-0 and they didn't look great that day. So yeah, Bielsa might be a shout, but ideally I don't want to get rid of managers. I think that's the problem with modern football is we just chop and change far too often. It's just with Jose, there's just no fun, there's no enjoyment, there's just nothing there to make me even hold on to and think, right, there's something to build on here. It just doesn't feel like there is. I certainly wouldn't get rid of him until the end of the season. I just think that would be absolutely ludicrous right now. So he's got until the end of the year. And yeah, if we don't win anything, then there is a good chance that it'll be got rid of, even if it costs us loads of money. I don't know. There's far too many. I could go into a long thing about football finances and how there's no money in football. So who would we buy at the moment anyway? Like how much money do we need to spend? How much money have we got? Everyone's losing money. It's like, it's a really tricky time to know what's going to happen with football and at the moment, and whether we would have the money to sort of pay Jose off and then whoever comes in to let them buy the players they need to. It's like, COVID has really sort of thrown a spanner in the works. I think certainly for Spurs, with the stadium being built, they probably had plans and ambitions based upon all that money coming in. Now we're like 120 million pounds short every season. It's like I'm really not sure what we're going to do.
Well, I guess moving on from the unfun Mourinho to something a bit more fun. Although rather than looking forward and projecting what might be with Spurs, we're going to actually look back. And I think we can all probably agree that, relatively speaking, in the past few years, this is quite an average spell for Spurs at the moment, because you guys have come a long way. And well, I was going to say overperformed, but that's not true. You guys you've been a good team for the last few years. Yeah. So let's look back to more average times in the past when Spurs were definitively a very average side. And we're going to build.
Look at the smile on your face.
Yeah, no, I am
enjoying this, isn't he?
I am enjoying this quite a lot. I won't deny it. But feel free to take me down a peg if you get the opportunity. But, basically, we're going to build the most average Spurs team from memory. And I've got selections of goalkeepers, and then we're probably kind of like a 4-4-2. We'll end up building it. I'll name the names, and between you guys, you can kind of pick one person per position. So goalkeepers, we're going to start with the likes of Casey Keller, Ian Walker, Radek Cherny, Michel Vorm, and Aurelio Gomez. Are there any one name in particular or a couple that are really screaming out to you as the most average keeper that Spurs have had?
It's going to be Cherny. He didn't really play that much, to be fair. And all the others had moments anyway. I thought Casey Keller was all right at times, but he was kind of, part of that mediocre Spurs side at the end of the sort of 90s, wasn't he, and early 2000s. So, Cherny didn't do anything, so I'll definitely have him, even though Vorm only played about 10 games or something, didn't he, in the end?
Yeah, it was a interesting one. He was quite, like, in theory, like the best backup keeper in the league, Michel Vorm, but quite a strange decision for him to go from Swansea.
That was in theory. The reality of Vorm was, sadly, he was so rusty whenever he played. Yeah. God.
Well, Joe, I guess let's move on to the right backs. And I've got Pascal Chimbonda, Paul Stalteri, Kyle Norton, Chris Gunter, Noé Pamarot, and Stephen Kelly are the names.
I mean, in more recent times, Kyle Norton was. I mean, it feels quite kind calling him average. He was a terrible player for Spurs. But I guess in terms of pure average, not good, not bad, but just sort of doing an okay job, probably Stalteri. He did have that amazing moment against West Ham when he got the last minute winner. So, but yeah, for me, it's got to be one of Stalteri or Norton.
What about you, Franco?
Yeah, as soon as you said Norton, that was my choice. I mean, he probably played left back as many times as right back because we haven't got anyone to play at left back today. Carl, get on. It's like that was the extent of it. And you know, when you're just you play on one side and the only time you're going to get to play is on the other side, you're not valued.
I don't know why, but for some reason at the time, Kyle Naughton and Kyle Walker signed for Spurs. In my head, I was like, Kyle Naughton's the hyped one. He was. What was up with that?
Kyle Walker was like the slightly younger support signing.
Exactly. Just came out of nowhere, out of the shadows, and then eclipsed Kyle Naughton in a big way. Moving on to the centre backs, and I've got Ricardo Rocha, and then is it Craig Gardner? No, not Craig. Anthony Gardner. There's a lot of Gardners. Gary Doherty, Vlad Chiriches, Federico Fazio, Callum Davenport, and Chris Perry, if you can name two of those guys. Franco.
I mean, Davenport rarely played, and didn't he get stabbed in the legs or something by
he did by like his sister's boyfriend or something.
That was it, sister's boyfriend. So was it?
Very weird.
Sounds a bit dodgy, doesn't it? And the Ginger Pele, people seem to have some kind of affection for him, but he was absolute dog dirt. I mean, I grew up in Norwich, and he went there afterwards, and I saw him kicking about town as well with a girlfriend that was far too attractive for him, and but he was absolutely terrible. You know, when on Football Manager, and there was occasionally a player that was a defender stroke striker.
Yeah.
So you were just there going, what's he going to be better at? Oh no, he's pretty rubbish at both. And I never like a defender stroke striker. I'll put it that way. So he's probably the worst out of that. But yeah, there's a list there, to be fair.
Yeah.
I guess Doherty for sure will make it in. It's good to know as a fellow ginger myself that there's hope in terms of getting an attractive girlfriend one day.
It wasn't that. He had a potato as a face as well. It's like there was more to it.
I'm going to take that as a compliment. And here,
he's in Boston. He's in Boston these days. It's about as close to you as we are. But if you're ever in Boston, look him up.
I will do. I'll have to hit up Gary Doherty if I'm on the East Coast. Joe, would you want to find a partner for Gary Doherty in centre back?
Yeah. Davenport probably didn't play enough. Maybe Fazio. He was just so slow. I know he's had like quite a good career aside from Spurs, but yeah, that one season at Tottenham in the first year of Pochettino, actually, he didn't cover himself in glory. Let's put it that way.
I used to sign him on Football Manager when he played for Seville, and he was go on to become like the best centre back in the game, which obviously did not really
happen.
The thing is, this is what makes you question our scouting network, because we were basically like, we play a high press, we play a high line, and we press, and they're like, oh right, so would you want like a giant who's immobile to come and play? yeah, that's a good idea. He just was getting skinned left, right, and centre, and just looking so bad. And as soon as you get put in an uncomfortable position as a defender, everything just seems to fall apart. He couldn't even pass a ball like 10 meters in the end. We just destroyed him, and I think he then went and played well again. It's just like it's like a small blip in his career at Spurs.
Yeah, there was a back in the day centre back from Ukraine that Barcelona signed. It was awful. Dmitry Treginski, same situation, just immobile. What are you thinking? How can the best team in the world sign a player like this? But yeah, Fazio, it's a good memory. Moving on to the left backs, we've got Asu Akoto, Lee Young Pyo, Ben Thatcher, Zeki Friars, Gilberto, Paul Konchesky, Timothy Atuba, Eric Edman, and Mauricio Tarraco. Franco.
Well, it's definitely not going to be Asu Akoto because he was decent, and even Lee Young Pyo for a right-footed left back. It was just the most. He did all right. It was the most frustrating thing because he had no left foot. It wasn't even like he would always be on his right. So for the opposition, it was fairly obvious what he was going to try and do. He would get to sort of like, even if he pushed up, he'd get to the edge of the box and then have nothing. He'd be like, well, you're not going to put in a cross because you've literally got no left foot. So I feel like he tried at least hard. What were some of the other options? There was some
Ben Thatcher, Zeki Friars, Gilberto, who signed from, I think, Berlin.
Yeah, Zeki Friars or Gilberto. Neither of them played too much, but they were both terrible. And again, it was this thing where we bought Friars and we thought he was going to be good. Wasn't he from
United, I think.
United.
Yeah. There was a weird story, he ended up in Belgium and then United got really angry, I think, when Spurs got him, or threatened Spurs with legal action. I don't know. And then it was just a massive anticlimax because he was just average as hell.
Really
I think
average.
he only really played in when the Sherwood era, the ill-fated Sherwood era. He had a bit of a spell then, but oh god.
We got the back four in the and the keeper. So let's move on to the defensive side of midfield. And I've got Michael Brown, Pedro Mendes, Dean Marney, Didier Zakora, and Tom Carroll up for grabs. And maybe defensively, let me throw Hossam Ghali in there as well.
Do you want to go, Joe?
I mean, Michael Brown was pretty average.
Even his name is a very average name.
Yeah, it's quite a standard name. He'd been playing like fairly well for Neil Warnock's Sheffield United, who hadn't even been promoted at this point to the Premier League. And then, yeah, I mean, I was quite young when he was at Spurs, but I just remember not being blown away at all. I think
it wasn't even fairly well, Joe. Didn't he score something like 20 goals for Sheffield? Because it was something ridiculous.
Tong has struck up a nice little partnership, I think. I almost feel like Tong might have been the better one of the two. I think we bought the wrong Michael.
He missed the trick.
But yeah, maybe he did. I think he probably did score quite a few goals there. But yeah, he just came to Spurs and yeah, he just looked like a sort of fairly good Championship midfielder. I mean, he did carve out a bit of a Premier League career afterwards, but I'm not quite sure how.
I'm looking it up. He got 22 goals in 54 games for Sheffield United.
That's
like the Frank Lampard of Sheffield.
It's an amazing return. And then we decided to buy him, and he scored 3 goals for us in 3 seasons.
Oh dear.
Do you remember one of them? One of his goals, I think he ran the entire length of the pitch, just taking these little micro steps with absolutely no pace. He's just, I don't know, it was so weird. He was, having never seen him play football when he came, thinking, right, he scored loads of goals. I was thinking, great, he's going to be brilliant. And he was just nothing like that. He was just a bit like an angry, slow midfielder, wasn't he? He was just every now and then.
It looks like he's kind of earned his place in defensive midfield of this average team in that case.
Definitely.
The centre midfielders are going to be from Timu Taino, Jamie Redknapp, Stefan Freund, Kazuyuki Toda, Danny Murphy, Kevin Prince Boateng, or Lewis Holtby. Joe, go for it.
I mean, I quite liked him when I was younger, but I'm pretty sure he was really average. So Stefan Freund, I think I'd say. Seemingly nice guy, and he had his spell on the AVB coaching staff. But yeah, I don't think he was that good.
Do you agree with that, Franco, or is there another name that you think needs to be in there?
Yeah, he was bad. But then Lewis Holtby as well, another player that we got excited about. We thought we'd kind of got him on a cheap and we'd stolen him, and we hadn't. We just got somebody that wasn't that great. And again, he kind of started off, looked quite bright, put loads of effort in, but he was a bit like an Eric Lamela without any skill. So he was like all heart, all effort, but nothing else really. So yeah, he wasn't great.
Let's throw Holtby in, I think, a bit of the left foot and along with Michael Brown, a bit of balance for the centre midfield. Moving on to the wings, and we've got the left-hand side. So I'm starting with a player who, honestly, I think it's a stretch to call him a winger if you're talking about mobility, but Andy Reid, otherwise on the left, otherwise would be Matty Etherington or Reto Ziegler, Stephen Pienaar, or George Nkudu. Franco, go again.
Oh, Nkudu, definitely, because he just didn't do anything. I mean, he didn't get very much opportunity at all. I felt a bit sorry for him, to be fair, but it just shows you, because I guess Bale dominated that left for quite a few years, and we've not had anybody of that quality really. And I think even Pienaar, didn't we get him on like his contract was expiring and we got him cheap and we thought brilliant, we've got a steal. He just did nothing. For Spurs really. He got a few goals, but Andy Reid, he was bought as part of the Dawson thing, wasn't he, as well? And he was sort of the main player, but again, he was more just like a player that got laughed at and called fat, like Lampard. That was it. We didn't expect anything from him after that. But I think and Ziegler, I think, was probably more of a left back, and I didn't mind him, but he just didn't stick around for long. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think Nkudu's a good shout, actually. I mean, again, there was such a big transfer saga surrounding him. And actually, like, there was a lot of hope that we'd signed quite a young, exciting attacking midfielder. But, like you said, he didn't play much. But when he did play, he didn't leave much to be desired.
Well, I've got a couple more of those names in terms of pacey wingers who kind of flatter to deceive. And this is going to be on the right-hand side. And then a third one who I wouldn't necessarily call a pacey winger. But the first two are Wayne Routledge and Giovanni Dos Santos. And then the third one is David Bentley. Franco, I'll let you go again first for this one.
Oh, it's got to be Bentley, hasn't it? Goal against Arsenal aside, he was the biggest waste of money at the time. And I've argued this on a thing I've written before, where I basically said I think Bentley's partly to blame for Levy refusing to spend money on players because he's been eternally scarred by that. He probably got convinced, no, look, Bentley's on great form. He's got, his English pedigree. He's been in all the youth teams and he's got a great right foot. And we bought him, he did nothing, and then Redknapp just got the arse with him and decided never to play him ever again. And that was it. And he went, well, you're paying me shitloads of money, so I think I'm going to stay here for the next 5 years.
And retire.
And didn't he? We tried to send him to Russia at one point. I think
he went. He played for FC Rostov, and living in this sort of not very well known city in Russia. Very weird thought. But he now owns I think a nightclub in Marbella or a restaurant. So that's what he's doing. Well, not doing that these days with COVID, but that's sort of his life. These
does
days.
Not surprise me. He'll be like the next Wayne Lineker in about 30 years' time. He'll be there trying to bang 18-year-olds.
Yeah, that's obviously his mentor in life.
Joe, then Bentley does it for you. He's average enough to make it on the right wing.
Yeah, he does. And obviously, Kai, I have fond memories of being undercover in the Arsenal end with you when Bentley scored that goal.
Oh, really? Biting your knuckles.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably the best and worst place to be for that goal. Surrounded by upset Arsenal fans, I couldn't really properly, let loose.
Yeah, Joe and I have had some memorable nights at the Emirates. Moving on to the forwards, and I guess I'll let each of you pick one. So I'll propose it first to Franco. These are from Mido, Vincent Janssen, Soldado, Postiga, Zamora, Dempsey, Sahar, and Ng. If you could have picked one of those.
Oh, my days. There's just so many bad. And you didn't even mention like Andy Booth or Raziak. You didn't even mention Raziak.
Raziak I was considering, but I thought he was just too bad. Andy Booth.
I think, he's not even average. He's just...
Raziak was too bad to make the list of bad players. Christ. I think, as much as it pains me, I'll say Soldado. Because again, loads of money, loads of expectation, only scored penalties. And I think like 1 or 2 goals from open play. It was so few and far between. We literally broke him, I think. I can't remember who it was in the Europa League we played. And there was a time when he went one-on-one.
Oh, Fiorentina, I think.
Fiorentina, it was Fiorentina. Yeah. Went one-on-one, clean through. It's like, any striker would have put that away. And he managed to fluff it up at the last second because we just destroyed him. He had no confidence. And I felt really bad because he obviously tried a lot, but like you watch his YouTube videos of the goals he scored the season before he came to us and everything was coming off. He was like, he'd just try outlandish, like a cross would come in, he'd volley it from the edge of the area, fly in the top corner. He was just on absolute peak form and confidence. Came to Spurs within about 2 months, we'd broken him and he never recovered. A massive waste of money and all of our hopes and dreams of that sort of the Magnificent Seven were shattered and he was part of it.
I think even strangely enough, back in the day, he might have been at Real Madrid and they must have realized that he wasn't quite, didn't cut the mustard. So I think Valencia is where he kind of made a name for himself. And then you guys, money well spent, of course. Yeah. Well, Joe, how about Soldado's strike partner?
Oh, yeah. I think I'll complete this team by letting Helder Postiga slot in alongside him, just because he was young when we bought him, but he was seen. I think there was a lot of excitement and Glenn Hoddle kind of came out and said how, amazed he was we were able to pull it off and he was one of Europe's hot prospects. And then I think he scored twice for Tottenham or something like that. And again, he was young and he sort of recovered to some extent and scored against England that summer in the Euros. But my memories of him were just a guy that just wasn't good enough for the Premier League. And it was all pretty average, unfortunately.
And he was quite expensive at the time. I think it was like 6 million or something, which was not cheap. And like you say, it just didn't work out for him again. We'd like Everson as well. Remember we bought him and he was touted as like the most exciting striker in Europe. And he didn't have a terrible career at Spurs, but he was never like the most exciting striker in Europe. So it's weird. We seem to buy these youngsters. It's almost like, who's saying this? It's like their agents are there putting these ideas out there in the press. Oh, he's the most exciting striker. Spurs are like, let's buy him.
Yeah, he's pretty much guaranteed. If the kind of build-up is that he's an exciting striker, that he's going to be average given kind of the acquisitions that Spurs have made in the striking positions over the past few years.
That was it. That was the big difference between Spurs and Arsenal in those days, is that Arsenal would pluck some player from obscurity and he'd end up being an absolute world beater. We'd do the same.
We've made a few mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah, but he wasn't obscure enough. That's the thing. He was touted as being like, Wenger would just find these players somewhere in France, like in a small league or something, one of the lower leagues, and they'd turn out to be brilliant, and then we just buy absolute dross.
Like Yaya Sanogo, so same thing. I guess that pretty much completes the average 11. I'll read it back. It's goalkeeper Radek Cherny, back four from right to left of Kyle Norton, Gary Doherty, Federico Fazio, and Zeki Priors, and then midfield again, right to left is David Bentley, Michael Brown, Lewis Holtby, and Georgian Kudu. And then up top is Soldado and Postiga. Obviously, a few of these guys aren't playing anymore, but I think even put them all in their heyday, this team would potentially be in a relegation fight. Yeah. It's not good. It's not for you.
They might even beat Derby's record, I think, of least points in a season. You've got no goals. You've got a leaky defence. You've got a midfield that's just going to get yellow carded.
There's no redeeming qualities whatsoever, essentially.
Nope.
Yeah.
Cheers for that. It's made me realise the situation's not that bad at the moment. Is it?
Exactly. That's what, we thought things aren't going well for Spurs. So at least we can think, at least it's not as bad as that. And well, at least not yet anyway. But on that note, that does bring us to the end of today's show. So thanks to my co-host Keitel, and a special thank you to our guest Franco. Franco, we hope you've enjoyed yourself. And also, how can our listeners follow you and keep up to date with all things Cheese Room related?
Well, the Facebook page is the big thing, but we've been destroyed by Zuckerberg in the last week. I think because the page was started in Australia, they've basically blocked it, so you can't access it. But apparently, it's being sorted out and rectified. So we should be back there. Facebook, look up the Cheese Room podcast. If not, we're on all the socials. We've got a YouTube channel where we occasionally post videos, but then Twitter and Instagram. And then obviously, if you want to give us some money and come on Patreon and be part of the gang, then patreon.com/the Cheese Room podcast. And we're obviously available on Spotify, iTunes, and all of your main podcast providers.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, I hope all Spurs fans and all football fans in general really give the Cheese Room podcast a listen. And then on the topic of how to follow people, remember to follow us too. Across our social channels. That's at United Mates FP, and that's for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We were actually kicked off Instagram earlier this year, so we feel your pain.
You rebels, what were you doing?
Oh, it was just, we put some music on that we shouldn't, nothing too glamorous, unfortunately.
Outrageous.
But we're also on YouTube. We haven't been kicked off there yet, so subscribe to us there. Just type in the United Mates Football Podcast, and you should find us. That is all for now. Thank you very much, and goodbye.